Today we're going to look at 30 pieces of evidence outside of the Bible that demonstrate the historical accuracy of the Gospels. Sit back and enjoy the ride. First is the ossuary of James, the brother of Jesus. The existence of a Jewish ossuary or bone box was discovered in 2002, which dates back to the time of the Gospels. The inscription on the side says, James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus. Statistical analysis of name frequencies in ancient Jerusalem show that there would have been about 1.71 people named James who would have had a father named Joseph and a brother named Jesus. This means that the ossuary is strong archaeological evidence for the existence of James, the brother of Jesus. An analysis performed in 2013 by leading experts shows that a film on the inscription that only develops over long periods of time, along with an analysis of the microfossils on the inscriptions, demonstrate that the artifact is indeed authentic. Likewise, in 1990, the ossuary or bone box of Caiaphas, the high priest mentioned in the Gospels, was discovered. The dating of the box matches the time and place, and the ornate decorations on the box make sense in light of the fact that Caiaphas was the high priest. The first century historian Josephus also mentions the existence of Caiaphas the high priest, further strengthening the narrative of the Gospels. In 1961, the Pilate Stone was discovered, which bears the inscription of Pontius Pilate dating to his lifetime. This adds more historical support for the biblical character, whose existence is also confirmed in the first century writers Philo of Alexandria, Tacitus, the Roman senator, and Josephus. It is also highly possible that Peter's house, the place where Jesus himself lodged, has been discovered. Archaeologists discovered an ancient Christian church dating to the 1st century, what has been described as the oldest Christian church. And when archaeologists studied the church, they found that it had previously been a house, but that it had been converted to a Christian church. The question of why a house in Capernaum, a small fishing village, would have been converted into an early church seems to indicate that it must have been the house of an early Christian leader. Peter is the disciple who lived in Capernaum at the time, making him the best candidate. This means that this may have been Peter's house, the very house where Jesus slept. Scholars doubted that the Pool at Bethesda ever really existed since there were no non-biblical records of it. But then, in the 1930s, it was discovered. Roman historian Tacitus confirms the Gospels by saying that Jesus was crucified when Tiberius was Caesar and when Pontius Pilate was in charge of Judea. This confirms the time frame that the Gospels give for Jesus' death. Tacitus also says that Christianity began in Judea, confirming what the Gospels say about the geographical origins of Christianity. Tacitus also reveals that within 35 years of Jesus' death, Christianity had spread widely to Rome, over 1,400 miles from its birthplace in Jerusalem. Since Christianity spread so quickly, it would have been impossible for someone to systemically distort central Christian teaching across the entire world. Therefore, the Gospels do not represent a distorted version of Christianity that was different from what the eyewitnesses originally taught. Pliny the Younger, the governor of Bithynia 80 years after Jesus' death, reported in a letter to the emperor that so many people were becoming Christians in his area that the pagan temples were becoming deserted. This adds support for the narrative in Acts 19:27, which talks about the same kind of event happening in Ephesus. This also adds further support that Christianity spread very quickly. Peter Williams states, "In those days, when it was difficult and even dangerous to travel, it would not have been possible for any group without political authority to impose a major change of beliefs on so large and widespread a set of adherents. Therefore, the Gospels do not represent teachings that had been changed from the earliest Christian teachings." Writing around the same time that the Gospels were written, the non-Christian, non-biblical historian Josephus further proves the reliability of the Gospels by revealing the existence of Jesus, John the Baptist, James the brother of Jesus, and, as already mentioned, Caiaphas and Pilate. Josephus also records that the high priest Ananias ordered James the brother of Jesus to be stoned for his beliefs. Since Jesus' own brother was willing to die for claiming that he had seen the risen Jesus, this makes it unlikely that he was lying. Since the Gospels have proven to be consistently accurate in the places where they do intersect with non-biblical sources, it makes sense to think that they would also be reliable in the places where they don't intersect with outside sources. Also, the Gospels' use of Jewish names in 1st century Palestine matched the statistics for name frequencies in 1st century Palestine. Cambridge scholar Richard Bauckham created statistics on Jewish names using sources including Josephus, the Dead Sea Scrolls, early rabbinic texts, Jewish bone boxes, and inscriptions. He used this data to determine the frequency of Jewish names and found that the frequency of names in the Gospels closely matches his statistics for 1st century Palestine. For example, he found that 15.6% of male Jews in Palestine had one of the two most popular names, Simon or Joseph. Likewise, the Gospels present 18.2% of their male Jewish characters as having these same names, a very close percentage. Likewise, 41.5% of male Jews in Palestine had one of the 9 most popular names, while these same names make up 40.3% of male Jewish names in the Gospels. The same applies to female names. 28.6% in Palestine had one of the 2 most popular names, which corresponds to 38.9% in the Gospels, and 49.7% had one of the 9 most popular names, which corresponds to 61.1% in the Gospels. The closeness of these stats is shocking. This is especially important since different time periods or regions than the ones depicted in the Gospels have completely different frequencies of Jewish names. For example, out of the 7 most frequent Jewish names in Alexandria, Egypt during the life of Jesus, 6 of these 7 names don't appear in the Gospels at all as characters. This is because Jewish name frequency depended on location. Different places have different name frequencies. The same applies no matter where you look, whether it be Libya, Western Turkey, etc. Different places had different name frequencies. Also, whenever the Gospels mention someone with a high frequency name, they give more information to clarify which person they're talking about. For example, look at the most popular male Jewish name, Simon. The Gospels talk about Simon Peter, Simon the Zealot, Simon the Leper, etc. However, when they mention a low frequency name like Thomas, they don't clarify which one they're talking about. They just say Thomas. This shows that the Gospels are well aware which names are common and which are not, since they only clarify the names of people that are likely to be confused with someone else. The Gospels' accuracy with name frequency shows some interesting facts. First, the Gospels cannot have been written significantly later than the events that they record because name frequency continues to change over time. Also, the Gospels cannot have been written far away from the events that they record because name frequency changes by region. Imagine being asked to write a story set in France 100 years ago. You weren't able to use the internet and you don't have access to any stats on name frequencies. You might be able to find a few French names you can use, but chances are the name frequencies in your story won't match the real-world statistics for that setting. Most people don't have a perfect knowledge of name frequencies for their own location. This is because their own limited experience gives them too small of a data sample to give them an overly accurate estimate of name frequencies in their area. Therefore, the Gospels are likely not creating stories of fictional people, but instead present real historical people since the name frequencies so accurately match the data. Since statistics on name frequencies weren't available in the ancient world, and since there was no practice of comparing name frequencies in written accounts to the name frequencies of the outside world, there would have been no point for someone who is making up a story to go through the effort of making sure the names in his fictional account accurately matched those of the outside world, even if it were possible to do so. Since no one would be fact-checking his names, there would be no point. The fact that all 4 Gospels, each relying on multiple sources for their information, all have accurate name frequencies throughout, make it much more likely that they're tapping into a real historical narrative than that a bunch of evil geniuses with supernatural intellects conspired to write a story specifically to trick scholars in 2,000 years when name frequency statistics would be developed. Have you ever watched and loved a movie and been able to perfectly retell the plot, and yet you didn't remember the names of the main characters? That's because one's name has no logical connection to the person himself. Remembering a story doesn't help you remember someone's name. Names are one of the easiest details to forget. So think about this. If the gospel writers got the names right in their stories, how much more likely are they to accurately recall the stories themselves? If they remembered the most forgettable details, how much more the most memorable details as the plots of the stories? Now let's look at the non-biblical Gospel of Judas and see how it compares to the canonical Gospels in its accuracy with Jewish name frequencies. It mentions only 2 names suitable for Palestinian Jews, Jesus and Joseph, both obviously taken from the canonical Gospels. Other than that, it seems to invent its characters by taking names from the Greek Old Testament or contemporary mysticism, names such as Harmathoth or Yaldabaoth. Needless to say, it's easy to see how much a gospel that fabricates its stories fails to match real-world name frequencies. If you liked this video, please subscribe. Seriously, I'm actually planning to make this a 3-part series where I make 3 videos where I each give 30 arguments for the reliability of the Gospels. So if you want to see the next video, you'll have to subscribe.